Katara inspires a group of oppressed earthbenders, for better and for worse, and the full consequences of her decisions and of her optimism are shown in full. This is Avatar Explained for episode 106, Imprisoned, Part 1, Synopsis. So Team Avatar comes across Haru, an earthbender. When he sees them, he freaks out, he panics, he doesn't know what to do, and he returns home. And when they finally talk to him, they realize that he doesn't want them to know that he's an earthbender. Earthbending has been made illegal by the Fire Nation, which has occupied his village. This offends Katara on a very deep and personal level. It's very visceral for her, because her bending is a huge part of her very identity as a person. So, she wants to help Haru, and she wants to inspire him to use his bending. When they come across an old man who's trapped under rocks, she is so encouraging that she convinces Haru to earthbend him out of there. All is well at first, but then the old man tells the Fire Nation that Haru used his earthbending, so the Fire Nation comes and takes Haru away. Because of this, Haru is placed in a Fire Nation prison just like his father. This prison is a huge metal ship. Katara feels terribly guilty for her own role in this situation, so she wants to break Haru and the rest out of there. She doesn't know how at first, but eventually they come up with this plan to get Katara thrown on the ship. They make it look like she's earthbending, so she's thrown in prison. When she gets there, she tells them about the Avatar and gives this very stirring, very inspiring speech, trying to convince them to stand up and fight. It's all very glorious and stirring, but it doesn't work. Their spirits are broken. And the Warden, voiced by George Takei, mocks her for this. But she doesn't give up. She's relentless. Eventually, Aang and Sokka go to the ship as well, and together, the three of them come up with a plan to free the Earthbenders, defeat Warden George Takei, and free the village of the Fire Nation. It's an imposing task, and they have a terribly difficult time convincing these broken, lonely people that there is something worth fighting for, but eventually they do. The reason these prisoners are on a ship to start with is because there's no Earth. They're helpless, or so it seems. Eventually, Aang and the team manage to put coal on the deck of the ship, which gives the Earthbenders something to use to fight back against the Warden and the Fire Nation as a whole. At first, Warden George Takei thinks this will just fail because the people are broken, but gradually they rise up. With Katara's words inspiring them, they fight back and win. Warden George Takei is defeated, and all is made well. This is a great episode, really digging into what makes Katara a great character. She's inspiring. She's a little naive about it, but she's genuinely committed to freeing people. She is an optimist. She's not a complete optimist, and she does have her moments of doubt, but she is a stout believer in the idea that things can go right, that despair and dismay don't have to win out, and if there is oppression, it should be fought, no matter where it is or how small it is. It takes a while for her message to catch on, but that it does is a testament to her determination and her resilience. Part 2, Analysis. This isn't the best episode of Avatar, but it's still a solid episode. It's a little more simplistic than the best offerings of the series, but it still has a very strong and well-defined conflict. The pacing is smart, the characterization is pretty sharp, and overall this is a great episode toward really defining who Katara is as a character. And indeed, the Katara parts of the episode are its best. Now, there are some other smart, interesting parts of this episode. I do like how they maintain the characterization of Aang as a complete and total goof. He's an empathetic goof, and he's a tender-hearted goof, but he's a goof nonetheless. And he's still just a kid. When they're trying to execute this plan to make it look like Katara's earthbending, he misses the cue at first to launch a blast of air to make the rock rise, and they have to call him again. And that is a very small moment, but it's helpful in establishing that yes, though he may be the Avatar, he is still a goofy kid at heart. He doesn't deny it. It really is a part of him. It's kind of sweet, although it does show how far he still has to grow. Of course, that whole joke as a whole is really great, that whole sequence. I love how the Fire Nation soldiers think Momo is the Earthbender instead of Katara. May not be the smartest joke in the series, but it makes me laugh every time I watch this episode. Animation is a great medium for conveying space. A big part of using the medium of animation effectively is putting characters in the right place at the right time, and this joke is an example of that. Momo just happens to be in the exact perfect spot that they believe he's earthbending. Although it does show you how dense some of these soldiers can be. Speaking of less than practical members of the Fire Nation, let's talk about George Takei's Warden, who is one of the better one-off Fire Nation villains in the show. He's not a particularly deep character, but that does not lessen my enjoyment. George Takei just hams it up, and the result is fantastic. He's this very brutal, very relentless villain, and it's satisfying to see him be defeated. It's not a deep satisfaction, but it's still cathartic, it still works, I still like it a lot. There's a great joke in this episode when George Takei throws a man overboard, and then asks a random crew member to bring him the captain, and the crew member says, that was the captain. It really shows you how unstable this character is and how willing he is to do everything to gain an edge, even if it's self-destructive in the long run. He is very well positioned as this tyrannical figure, but he has personality. He's not just a simple, grumbling boss to be taken down. He's a memorable character, and I'm glad they got George Takei for the role. Aside from that, I'd like to say that I really appreciate the setting of this episode. It's very grim and ominous. You really feel the isolation from the rest of the world. They're on this ship. There's no real way out for the prisoners. Either they band together and defeat the Warden and gain their freedom, or they live in misery and squalor. It's that simple. It's all very well defined. It's all very concise. It's all very appropriately grim. It really elevates the stakes of this episode. But more than that, what I remember about this episode and what elevates it above the sum of its parts is its interesting mix of idealism and cynicism. Katara gives this stirring, grandiose, beautiful speech that in any other film or show would earn her rapturous applause, and instead there's nothing. It really goes to show how broken these people are. But over the course of the episode, Katara is able to eventually win them over and inspire them to fight. It's idealistic, yes, but it's complicatedly so. If it was just Katara inspires them to fight and they win, it would honestly seem a little too simplistic and banal. But the way they do it, it makes it feel earned and deserved. Even lesser episodes like this are very well written. I've been saying this multiple times throughout the course of these Avatar Explained pieces, but it's definitely true here. What could have been simplistic pablum is instead given real depth and complexity. This is why Avatar is so fondly remembered. It's never afraid to go beyond what is expected. There's a real standard for quality in not just kids shows, but any real adventure show. And Avatar doesn't just clear that bar, it transcends it and really sets a new standard for what shows like this can accomplish with such a simple premise, and I really appreciate that. Part 3. Context. This is an important episode for creating the feeling that Team Avatar is helping lead this great revolution against the Fire Nation. In some of the earlier episodes, it can seem a little too much like they're just a rogue band of travelers adventuring across the land. This episode does a great job of connecting them to others and really making them feel like they're part of something larger than themselves. We see this build and build throughout the series, culminating in the Day of Black Sun, which unfortunately does not have the support of the Earth Kingdom because it's been taken over, but it does have the support of all these different characters Team Avatar has met throughout their journey. And I really like that. It makes these one-off episodes feel like they have weight. They don't just feel like, oh, this happened to the character, and then they moved on and never thought about it again. I hate it when that happens. Everything in this show matters. Everything in this show has weight going forward. Even the minor characters play a larger role later on. It really creates the great feeling that you're slowly, piece by piece, building this great revolution that transformed the world. It really feels earned. It really feels beautiful. On a smaller scale, there are some important things about this episode, though. For one, Katara loses her necklace. She eventually gets it back. Zuko tries to tempt her with it in episode 109, the waterbending scroll, which is their first interaction. And the necklace becomes more relevant at the end of season 1, where it reminds Pakku of his bride-to-be that never was, Hana, Katara and Sokka's grandmother. That was, of course, her necklace that Pakku made her, and Katara's grandmother passed it on through the family to Katara. It's a really nice instance of something ostensibly minor really having a larger impact later. So much of Katara's identity is based around her culture and her traditions and her family, and that necklace is an important part of that. So her losing it is more significant than it would have otherwise been. If, say, Sokka had a necklace like that and he lost it, it would have been unfortunate, but it wouldn't have been that big of a deal. But because Katara is Katara, it has a much greater and more significant impact. As for Warden George Takei, we don't see him again, although I wish we did. He's a hilarious character and he adds a lot. Honestly, I like him as much as General Zhao. He definitely has as much personality. It's a shame we only see him in this one episode. We do, however, see Haru again. He's not one of my favorite characters, but I still appreciate that he comes back. Toph, who has joined the group by then, senses something between them, and one of my favorite jokes in the series brings him up. Katara is about to reveal a secret, and Toph just bursts out of nowhere that, yes, you did have a thing with Haru, or something to that extent. It's completely a non sequitur. It breaks the atmosphere entirely, and that's why it works so well. It's so random, but it does call back to everything the show has been building thus far. And that's really this episode as a whole, and these first few episodes as a whole. They're great on their own, but they're not the best episodes of the show by any means. I was already committed to the show by this point, but I was a bit discouraged by these low-key episodes at first, not because they're not bad, but because they didn't seem as powerful and poignant as, say, the Southern Air Temple. But the show justifies the existence of these episodes throughout its run. Viewed from the perspective of the entire series, one can really see how these early episodes build not just the characters, but the themes and ideas that will come to undergird the series as a whole. Even while telling these smaller scale stories, the show is building its very strong foundation. And that's something to be really respected. So anyway, thank you for watching. If you liked what you saw today, like, comment, subscribe, donate to my Patreon if you can, and tune in for the next Avatar Explained. Thank y'all. Adios, comrades.